Hello and welcome today, everyone. So let's talk about this today. You are not their parent, you are their leader, and your team is not your family. Families are messy, oftentimes dysfunctional, and very little time leaves space for holding space for individuality. We are in a workplace that is intentional with goals, with expectations, and with boundaries. But how do we start to overcome this drive to nurture and protect our teams and really lean into leading instead of parenting? So, good day, everyone. I am Christina Green, your generational translator in the workforce. And today we are talking about how to stop parenting your team and to start leading like a professional. Now, as leaders, when we prioritize family, this idea of the family narrative over in the workplace, over being a leader, we often start to shield people from accountability, from the discomfort, from we enable their growth instead of developing into the truly confident and capable contributors that they are and can be. Now, family vibes do not build high functioning teams. That's what leadership is for. When these lines are blurred and loyalty is prioritized overall, and our protection is our stance, then growth is impossible. People stay comfortable, they stay stagnant in their positions and not really accountable for what's going on. And it puts the burden on us as leaders. So let's talk about this some more. So here's what corporate parenting looks like. And if you've been hanging around me long enough, you know that this is my favorite term. This is something that I invented that really is trying to encapsulate and talk a little bit more about what's going on in the generational dynamics in the workplace. Well, it's it kind of looks like the emotional labor, right? Where we keep the peace by sacrificing our own peace, right? We start to take on that emotional burden that would normally exist within a team, but we take it on ourselves. It's the cushioning of feedback where we are trying to soften the blow, right? Where we're trying to even shelter them or shield them from um, uh, having a discomforting conversation. It's absorbing their stress instead of allowing them to own their share in the process, right? Of the discomfort. And it's staying nice instead of being honest, right? So and I'm not saying that we be ruthless and that we get straight to the point and ignore, the human experience in this process. Not at all. But when we lean into this, when we lean into carrying the emotional labor, we also too are disproportionately taking on the responsibility that needs to be distributed across the team or to those who it is intended for. We blur those lines, right? Where our roles stretch from leader into a fixer, where we're trying to be solution oriented, constantly moving in the space of solving for others. We also too start to take on the role of therapist. And good grief, none of us are qualified to do that, but we also too start to lean in and provide advice instead of weighing in to be constructive, right? And objective. We also start to become the team parent, right? Where people are coming to us or our teammates are coming to us to navigate or to mediate conversations, right, between them and their teammates. It's this emotional hand holding that we need to let go of, right? It's self-sacrificing, where we are praising the hustle and those who essentially are burning out for the sake of carrying the team. We do this as leaders, where we will dive in and roll up our sleeves and do whatever's necessary, burn the oil for the purpose of shielding our team from having that themselves. We're also we're sacrificing, and we're sacrificing might seem noble, but also too we're teaching our team to rely on our exhaustion, right? And not to prevent it, to not be proactive in the prevention of trying to, step into a space that is more planful, that is more considerate, especially of you as a leader. And This all often starts with we're all a family here mindset, where we are treating one another as if we are a family. Now, I want to be really clear in saying that I'm not speaking against the the construction or the building, the rapport building of friendships at work. That's not what this is going against. But this is speaking when we rely the on those relationships to care allow us to not take accountability and responsibility for the work that we are each responsible for. And that's not just the leader, but that is everyone within the organization. When we rely on our relationships and have that take precedence over us executing, that is when we can start to create this dysfunctional imbalance, right? We start to where support starts to turn into over functioning, and we start to feel like there is an imbalance, that there's not a shared responsibility. We start to breed resentment and animosity towards one another. And that makes the workplace very toxic for everyone, where we start to prioritize connect when we prioritize connection, but when that connection starts to become control, right? Instead of it's a manipulation, perhaps we're manipulating the relationship instead of leaning into what's really important around responsibility and accountability. Everyone owning their role within the team. It can sound like, well, I stepped in before they messed it up, right? So you had this thought that they were already going to kind of screw things up anyway, so you proactively prevented the train wreck. Well, that's also too shielding them from taking the responsibility or experiencing the discomfort of having a miss, having a failure. Failure and misses are part of our growth. It's part of life. It's also part of work. So we have to make sure that I'm not saying let the carnage happen right in the train wreck, but there's a difference between spilling water and spilling oil, right? So okay, forgive the analogy there. But or perhaps maybe it sounds like, they're young, so I'm protecting them from burning out. So this means that you are prioritizing their comfort over your discomfort. So you're sacrificing yourself instead of allowing them to be part of that process. Let me see. I've got some comments here. I'll get Sandra. I will get to you in just a moment. Thank you for being present. It also too can sound like we're a family, so I didn't want to come down too hard on them. Listen, there is no growth that can be had if we are mixing words, if we are avoiding conversations, real honest conversations that are providing constructive feedback in that space. We've got to be able to allow people to experience what has happened, right? The pitfalls, the misses that have happened, and the opportunity to grow through them. Now, these might all seem harmless, but when productivity is suffering and your accountability is absent, no one is winning in this process. To be a leader and not a parent, we have to be supportive. We have to provide supportive mentorship, right? That means providing guidance and not just always being agreeable. We need to be intentional in how we are developing our team, how we are encouraging one another to grow together, and how we are building a healthy guidance with clear expectations, right? So that we are being clear in our directives as leaders to our teams, letting them understand what success looks like, as well as providing some guidance when things are missed. Okay, let me see here. Let me add this here. It is often hard to give feedback when we as managers feel like we didn't do enough to feel fair giving feedback. Yeah, we know that we all fell short in providing clear expectations. Yes, we do, right? I mean, we're all humans in these roles, right? And oftentimes, as leaders, we are constrained by policies, right? We are not, maybe not allowed to be as favorable, as supportive in our language, especially when it comes to performance reviews, because all of that starts to build a case, if you will, for why someone receives a merit increase or not, right? So these are some of the things that can certainly start to constrain us in our ability to lead on our teams. Great comment. Thank you very much, Sandra. Oh, and another one. People have to feel good, right? Helping them be accountable is bad, when in fact it's the best thing we could do is to help them grow to become independent. Absolutely. I agree 100%, right? It is all part of our growth. I like to use the riding the bike analogy. As leaders, we can help them to understand how to get on that bike, how to, logically how to move through that, what it feels like. We can hold the back of the seat, but when it's all said and done, they've got to be able to take that bike up the street and to experience what it's like to waver, right? To wobble as they're learning what it feels like to ride the bike and even perhaps maybe even to fall. And that's okay because we're not far behind, right? As leaders, we are there to help to pick them up and to help troubleshoot and how we can move forward differently. Thank you so much, Sandra. I appreciate you. Okay, let's keep going. So when we choose the role of parent over being a leader, it backfires because we start to build dependence that our team will have on us instead of helping them to build their own self confidence, right? We're telling them to rely on us. We're creating these dependencies where they need not exist, right? We are reinforcing this imbalance that if they fall short, then as their leader, we will pick up their slack, we will do their job for them. Now, there are some instances where this is absolutely necessary when you get into different seasons, right? Of what's of what's happening within your business. Everyone might need to kind of, roll up their sleeves and be part of that. And that can also to include the leader. But being proactive and being able to know when your season is and how to anticipate some of that, that's also too necessary, right? We don't want to perpetuate this thought that this imbalance is normal. This is how we should always be moving throughout our experiences. That, in fact, if they fall short, the leader will always pick up. Now, as leaders, we are always accountable for the work that our teams do. But how we become better leaders is by making sure that your teammates, that they are the ones who feel empowered to have the full responsibility of executing their role. How do we do that? By making sure that there's clear expectations and there is support as they move along that journey. As leaders, we can help them to remove barriers, we can help them to troubleshoot, but we cannot do the work for them. That starts to create that imbalance, right? We also too, if where we start to become the leader that is burnt out, we become resentful for our teams who are underperforming, right? And why are they underperforming? Is it because we are creating that dependency? Is it because that we are reinforcing the imbalance that you will save them every time? This is where we, as leaders, we have got to allow our teams the space, right? To be able to fail as well as to perform. This idea of the work family starts to reinforce guilt over growth and starts to prioritize silence over structure, right? So this is how we start to create this imbalance, and this is where we start to experience the hidden costs that are just not worth it on your team. So let me give you a little bit more background about me. So who the heck am I, and why am I talking to you about, generational intelligence or sensitivity within the workplace? Why does this even matter? Well, I was a Gen X leader for decades, and I did everything right, or I think I did everything that I was told that was right. Right? I was the strong one. I was the protector. I would absorb that stress, right? When they say that the crap rolls downhill, I let it hit me and it wouldn't hit my team, right? I absorbed much of that. So my team didn't have to. I thought that leadership meant being the martyr, right? I gladly took on that role, happy to be the one who was constantly shielding my team from from when you're in leadership, some of the nonsense that can happen, right? The noise that you hear at that level. Does not to mean that everything is supposed to, in fact, make it down to your team, right? As leaders, we're supposed to be able to discern what makes most sense there. But I burned myself out, right? I burned that candle at both ends. And guess what? My people were still burning out themselves. They were still disengaging from the process, and they weren't growing anymore because I was spending more time trying to fuel the fires, trying to shield them, trying to nurture them, trying to protect them, as opposed to trying to help to develop them. They weren't the problem. The problem was this outdated idea that I had that I was falling into, this playbook that I was part of, right? Of outdated expectations, these unspoken rules about what it means to be a leader, this hand me down leadership that was confusing support with sacrifice. So instead of being a martyr, I was to be a leader, but I didn't know what that meant. So I realized that real leadership, it doesn't mimic parenting. In fact, it actually starts to mirror partnership, right? It's a collaborative spirit. It is not one that is top down, that is a authoritarian. It is one that is in fact more communal. And now I get to help organizations to build this generationally intelligent teams where boundaries are respected, they're acknowledged, and they are respected. They are proactive in building those boundaries, where feedback is honest. You do not have to coddle, you do not have to cushion, you do not have to shield people from the truth, right? Where support is strategic. You can be specific about how it is that you are going to lean in and lean out, where you've got responsibility within your team, empowering your team to take and make decisions, right? With the safety, with building the psychological safety for people to feel comfortable in doing so. Because when, as leaders, when we stop parenting and we start leading, then people step up, right? They rise to the occasion, they rise to the challenge, they feel developed, they feel that they are part of the development and the growth of their team. They feel that that trust is starting to grow in their abilities to be able to execute, in their abilities to make decisions. This is how you build leaders. And everyone has the opportunity to level up, the opportunity to step in and say, this is what I want. This is the future that I want for myself. This is how I can define my own career trajectory. Okay. Now, every generation interprets we are all family a little differently, but mostly people hear this as unspoken rules, right? This unspoken playbook that essentially is guiding their workplace. It's blurred lines, right? Remember, family, we tend to, don't call me after 10 p.m., right? Oh, that's my sister. Oh, that's my cousin. I'll call them if I want to, if I really need something, right? It's not having it's not having respect for the boundaries in which are being set and being enforced. It's loyalty, it's valuing loyalty over honesty, right? I care that you have been committed to this team, to this organization, more than I do about you providing me honest feedback about how it is that we're doing, the decisions that we're making, our strategic discussions, how it is that we're pulling in the right teammates. So now let's break open this idea of corporate parenting. And by each generation, if you follow me long enough, you know that I love to do this. This is a lens through each generation, right? We're going to talk about what this actually feels like, what it sounds like, what each generation actually needs, and how to kind of start to put some language behind that. Because when we lean into being the parent instead of the leader, this is only going to breed resentment and dysfunction within our teams. Okay, so let's go. Oh, great question. It's a scary time waiting for people to rise. We often back away from that because of the pressure to deliver what is recognized and valued. Oh, 100%. Where's my emojis that I can respond to that, Sandra? Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, so now let's take this left to right. We're going to go from boomers all the way to Gen Z. And let me give my disclaimer about this as I do every time. Remember, the one thing to remember about generations, this is a baseline. This is how to start to understand at a baseline level across each generation. Every generation has individuals. Lean into understanding who is on your team, the individuals that occupy these generations. These are not meant to be a stick in the mud where you say, well, but what I understand about boomers or what I understand about Gen Z is this. No, use that as a way to start to know how to approach each generation and understanding what they value, the things that are important to them, and how you might be able to lean in a bit more. Okay. All right. So, what does parenting feel like for boomers? Well, it feels patronizing, right? It feels like you're calling them out on everything, or feels that you're overemphasizing on something greater than it is, right? It feels ageist. It feels that you're calling them out for their age rather than their experience and their contribution. Here's an idea of what it sounds like. You've been here forever. Just let the younger folks take it, right? Or take this one or make these decisions. So one, I know none of us say this, right? But this may be buried in some of the language that we are saying. That we may not say the younger ones or yet let the younger folks, but when we're leaning in to say, "Oh my gosh, you've been here forever." This starts to, well, one, this is rooted in ageism, right? So not only is it discriminatory, but it also too doesn't feel great to be on the receiving end. We and I will say no generation wants to hear this. Gen Z does not want to hear also too, oh, you're too new, right? You've only been here for 5 minutes, so settle down, right? It works both ways. So here's what they actually need is they actually need some clear recognition, right? And respect for their experience. Yes, they may have been in the industry, they may have been with the organization for an extended period of time, for perhaps even decades. See that as a value and not as a disadvantage. Here's an example of what you can say instead. Your experience is a huge asset, right? How would you approach this based on what you've seen work before? This is inclusive. This is how you start to welcome them into the conversation. Now, everyone is an individual. They may not respond to this exact language. So please, massage this in a way that makes sense for your team. All right, so let's keep going. Gen X. Gen X despises micromanagement, right? We already know that in the Gen X generation, collaboration is not necessarily what they lean into. They are very resilient. They tend to be very independent. But if you start to lean into the point of trying to control the how, right? Remember, I always say as leaders, we try to guide on the what is important, what needs to be executed. But when we start to lean into speak to what the how to do it, that is micromanagement. And no generation is going to enjoy that. And Gen X will absolutely fight you on it, right? They may not be vocal about it, but what they will despise being micromanaged. This can sound like, oh, send me a draft of that beforehand so I can tweak your talking points. I'm sorry, excuse me. If you've given somebody the responsibility uh, uh, to have the responsibility of executing on the presentation, on the initiative, on making decisions, do not feel the need to control what it is that they are saying. You can provide guidance to say, once you put it together, I'm happy to review it with you to see if there are any questions that you have and how it is that you might be able to approach this audience. Okay. What they need is the autonomy to be able to say and make decisions about what it is that they are doing, the charge you have given them to execute. They're also too looking for that clarity, right? Let them have the clarity and understanding their role and how it is that they are responsible for it. Now, what this can sound like is, well, here's the goal. Run with it and let me know if you run into any barriers, right? It's open. It is fully allowing them to take the lead, to take the reins, and just go ahead and leverage their expertise to execute, right? It's building the trust to trust them. Okay, now next are the Zennials. So Zennials, as we know, is this tiny spike of about 25 million people in between Gen X and Millennials, right? And they, what parenting feels like to them is this inflexibility, right? Not having a lens that is flexible in how it is that they are to execute. It is being overly prescriptive and not providing them with the autonomy to be able to create the outcome, to get to the same destination, but to create the pathway and how they get there, right? So that flexibility and how you're providing that guidance, that can feel or that inflexibility can feel like parenting, can feel like micromanagement to some extent. It can sound like that's not how we've done it, right? So just stick to the system or stick to the way that we've always done it. We know that all of that language is rooted in fear of change, right? Fear of irrelevant often, and it speaks to the fact that there are greater issues at play, right? That we are looking for comfort in the day to day that we are doing, and you'll likely hear those words sometimes from maybe Gen X or for Boomers, is because in many ways they've established those processes. They do not want to see their work die Is there somebody else who's taken over, right? So what they actually need is relevant leadership with space to contribute and to adapt. They want to know that they can have some shaping of the work that they're doing, right? How does it progress? They're also to looking to be collaborative. So they would like for them to be able to develop that process and how it is how they move forward. So not to be overly prescriptive about the how, right? An example of what this looks like is we haven't tried it that way, but I'm open, right? So walk me through your thinking. What is it that you're thinking that we can improve? Where could we start to approach this maybe a little differently? That's they're listening for the open mind to welcome them into the conversation to continue to improve. And this is not something that has to be a hard, fast yes. It can just being open to hearing the opportunities or the ideas that can be enough in this space. All right, let's keep going. Millennials is emotional manipulation, right? Where you are using you're guilting them or shaming them in some way into performing, into taking an action, into aligning with you and doing the thing that you are looking. It's kind of gaslighting micromanagement, right? You're trying to get them to do what you want them to do by getting them to believe that it was their idea. All right. What this can sound like is we really need you to step up and everyone is depending on you. Okay. If that doesn't sound like something that we perpetuate and constantly say to the oldest child, right? If you are the oldest or if you've heard this, it's often like, oh, your brothers and sisters need you. So, please do this thing, right? It's guilting them into taking an action. That just doesn't feel good for anyone. And it certainly doesn't belong in the workplace. Now, what they actually need is honest communication and accountability. That means accountability for them, but accountability for others as well, right? So give them honest feedback as to, if there are constraints, be open to that, be transparent, help them understand what it is that they don't see, communicate with them openly, and take accountability when decisions need to be made, when missteps happen, and they're looking for accountability across the team. This is not just for the leader, but especially at the leadership level to take the accountability to own the outcome and the results, right? If the decision was made at that level, then for the leader to be accountable to that as well, right? They're not looking to skirt the accountability for themselves because they will take that. They understand if they have the responsibility or the accountability to make the decision, if they're empowered to do so, then they will also to take that accountability, but they're looking for that to be shared, right? So where the accountability is necessary, where it should be, that it resides. Now, an example of this is I noticed that you've been quiet in meetings, right? So what's your take on how to move forward? This is allowing them, inviting them in to be contributors to the overall process, right? To weigh in on the experience that they have so far. What is the lens that they are viewing things and how it is that you can use that to shape the go forward? Okay. Now, lastly, for Gen Z, I think Gen Z is a highly misunderstood and I would say they take on the burden of too many workplace issues, right? This is when they are unfairly held to the burden of too many workplace issues, and so highly misunderstood, highly underutilized. But in the effort of having talking through each of these generations, I'm hoping that what you're gaining is a clear understanding of how to navigate this space between each generation. So, what does parenting feel like to Gen Z? Well, it feels like control disguised as mentorship, right? So it's kind of staying close to them to provide them with guidance, but in fact, actually micromanaging them, right? Thinking that we're showing them the ropes, but all we're doing is actually just allowing them to observe us working. That's not really mentorship. Mentorship is helping them to observe, but also to allowing them to experience, right? To be part of the process, moving through, even if they are observing in a meeting, for them to understand, for debriefing afterwards, to having a conversation as to why decisions were made, how it is that we came to that, right? So It's providing a lens and mentorship or guidance in a way that they may not have been otherwise exposed to. Now, this can sound like, let's get you involved in something small first, right? So you can prove yourself. Listen, they don't have any problems with proving themselves, but they won't they do not get bought into the idea of proving themselves if it's just for the purpose to be performative, right? Where especially when they're seeing maybe others who are not having to do so, when that performance is based more so on loyalty as opposed to actual outcomes, right? Actual measurable success that results that can be measured. What they actually need is transparency. They need to understand why it is that they're being asked to do things. Help them understand the connection between the work that they are doing and the overall objectives, either of the team, perhaps even of the organization, right? They're looking for collaboration and clear growth paths. If you want them to stay, if you want them to understand their contribution and how they can grow within your organization, you've got to help them understand what that next step looks like. And this also too applies to millennials. Millennials are very clear on understanding what does that career trajectory look like. And if you do not have career ladders, if you do not have career journeys understood at your team level, if you cannot navigate that conversation with them in a one-on-one, a performance review, they want to know, how do they get from point A, where they are today, to point B and to point C? What does that look like? What does that growth look like within the organization? If they do not see that, they will leave. They will not hesitate to leave, to find some other place that either will pay them better, that will provide them with greater clarity on how it is that they can move between A, B, and C, right? This is where and this isn't easy. I call this a free throw. Every organization should understand how every role contributes to the overall objectives of the organization and what does a potential journey look like for them. This comes out in your conversations with your team. Okay. So an example of this can be, here's where we see potential for you, but what areas do you want to grow in while you're here? Now, I specifically really like to focus on while you're here. Let's remember, gone are the days of thinking, or any of the generations. I would say that Gen X, we're the last generation that was truly bought into this idea that you move into a role, you sign up with a company, you serve your time, right? And you retire after 30, 40 years, or whatever that might look like. Gen Z has absolutely no thought process that mimics that. They do not care if they work for a company for 3 or 4 months if they find out, oh, this is not exactly for me, and they move on. They also too there's a growing trend of Gen Zs taking what they call these micro retirements. So they may work in spurts, 3 to 5 years, just so they can carve out a year or 6 months or whichever that looks like, so they can actually go out and experience life. They're not waiting until they're 65 to retire and then enjoy their life. That's just not happening. That's not a reality. And we all need to wake up to that. The fact that we even bought into that, I know many of us are feeling like we bought a bad bag of goods on that one, right? So while they're here, recognize that this is not personal, right? Help them. How can you leverage them in the workplace to support the work that needs to get done, while also to recognizing that they are looking for a career trajectory, for a clear path of that, but they're also to looking to be able to enjoy their life. So how do you build that culture into it that also to benefits others, right? So it's about accepting and improving PTO. How do you build the team and the structure that supports these types of dynamics, right? Okay. Yes, thank you, R. Holcomb. A free throw. Yes, absolutely. You're supposed to make them. All right. Now, next. So, how do we know when we've got it right? Well, people understand what success looks like, right? There are clear expectations and how to be successful. They're clearly identified, whether they are SMART goals or otherwise. You are clear about what is expected, as well as what is expected as far as with responsibility, what are they to deliver on, and what does that look like? What does success look like for them? That growth is prioritized over guilt. right? So, listen, what is most important is providing them with the opportunity to grow by providing honest feedback. Your team can function without you, right? Because you have built systems that are working, systems that can support the ongoing of the day to day. That you do not have to be there to turn this cog and to flick this switch and to push this button and to do all of those things. That you can step away as a leader and things are not going to fall simply because you are not there, right? So you've built these systems and your team can function without you. And your team wins are not tied to your worth. You're recognizing that there's a separation there's a separation between who you are and your value and the outcome, right? We are not necessarily measured. If we were measured by all of our failures, then I mean, my goodness, we would be the most shameful society possible, right? Start to draw a separation between the results and the work that you're doing and your own personal self-worth. We are not the work that we do. We may be the founders, we may be the creators, we may be the facilitators, the executors of this work, but that does not determine our worth. As well as that support does not require personal sacrifice. So when we have the emotional intelligence to recognize that we do not always have to give everything that we have and to sacrifice ourselves in order to achieve success, that is how we know that we are leading and we are not parenting. Now, I want to ask you this question to consider. Which of these do you feel most confident in as a leader, right? Checking off, absolutely. This is how I show up in this space. I believe 100% that I'm doing well, right? No one's looking for perfection, but I can say that I'm honestly have grown greatly in these areas. And then I want you to consider which might need more attention. And you don't have to identify more than one. Just think about at least one of them where you may need to lean in a bit more, right? You may need to try a new approach, some new strategies, right? Just make a note of that because then once awareness starts to breed action, starts to breed, change and things that need to evolve in your leadership style. Yes. Support does not require personal sacrifice. Absolutely. All right. So, what is the ROI of getting it right, right? The return on investment. Because listen, we're all here, of course, to make sure that our businesses are successful. And there has to be a return on the efforts that we make. Well, I will tell you, we always know this that anything, when you invest into people, then there's always a positive return, right? We have less burnout, we have higher team confidence, we have stronger accountability and performance, and we have a sustainable culture, one in which people are actively, intentionally part of, right? When we start to ditch this family narrative, it frees up everyone to show up fully, right? And it keeps the leadership focused on the growth and not guilt. We give ourselves permission to lead and we allow space and room for our teams to grow. Okay, so now we've talked about what's broken. We've talked about why this matters and why we need to lean into showing up differently. But how do we start to fix this? And that because that's where this shift really starts to begin. How do we start to be more leaders than we are parents? How do we drop this idea of parenting in the workplace and start being a real leader? Well, if you're ready to start to ditch this parenting versus and start actually stepping into leadership, then this is what I do all the time, right? If you're ready to start leading boldly, to start stepping into an awareness that is in your workplace that is generationally aware and leveraging your multi-generational teams to really support your strategic outcomes, then it's time to talk. If you've seen me before, use this QR code, get on my calendar. Let's have a real conversation about what this looks like for your team and for your organization. All right. So, every week on Wednesday, I go live and we dive into a new topic that is taking the generational lens across the board, but understanding how it is that we retain and we attract the right talent. How do we retain our top talent? How do we start to appreciate the multi-generational teams that we have? Now, next week, we're going to be continuing the conversation and we're going to dive into how to spot team burnout. Right before they literally start running out the door. Now, we're in the summer months, and we know that there is a lot that's going on right now. Our teams are reprioritizing how it is that they're spending their time. And you may start to see how it is that they are showing up day to day. So, join me next week. Let's start to peel this onion because burnout can start to take shape. It can start to truly rear its ugly head if we are not proactive in how it is that we are identifying it, as well as supporting our team through this process. Okay. Now, another question I want you to consider. What is one habit that you may need to unlearn so you can stop parenting and so you can start leading, right? Based on what we've spoken today and maybe others, right? What is one habit that you might need to unlearn that you want to move forward and start considering how it is that you show up as a leader on your team or even as an individual contributor? How can you start to support the cohesion, start to support the growth within your team? Okay, well, that is all for today. I thank you so much for your time and for your attention. As always, if you want to connect with me, there's the QR code on the screen. In the meantime, take care of yourself and take care of others. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye, everyone.